Chapter 2. There was a soft tapping at Nadia's shoulder. She groaned and rolled over. Cabran was at the bedside, leaning over her now awake form. He leaned back into a sitting position as Nadia rose. She checked the small clock situated on the bedside table. 5 p.m. exactly. Maybe Cabran can do something right. "All righty, get up, you. Can't head to dinner like this. You're absolutely filthy. Take a bath while I get dressed." Cabran ever so slightly bowed his head and lumbered into the other room. Nadia called after him. "Don't waste the water like you did at the inn. Better be out before I'm fully dressed." The storm maid rummaged through her bags. She'd included a variety of evening wear. She wasn't a noble, that much was true, but she sure could dress like one. She deserved a title on that alone. This place seemed casual, to say the least, but Nadia knew it could easily be some trick, another college prank. She'd impress Balder and the other researchers tonight, let them know who she was. Ah, here we are. Nadia pulled out a long red gown. Under brighter lights, the fabric would shimmer as if made of 1,000 little crystals. Her parents had dissuaded her from bringing her finer clothes to the observatory, saying they'd be useless and potentially end up damaged, but she couldn't just not bring them. What were they, mad? What else would one wear? The dress easily slipped over her head. As she brushed away a few wrinkles, the bathroom door opened. Cabran, patting his sopping hair with a hand towel, pointed at her clothes. "There's pants and a decent shirt in the gray bag. And dry your hair. I don't want you trailing water round here." Cabran went back into the bathroom. Most masters didn't care if their familiars changed in front of them, but Nadia despised the creature. She wanted to see as little of him as possible. She ran a brush through her brown curls, smoothing them down. After pulling on a pair of stylish but practical brown boots, the last finishing touch was a hair clip styled into a blue jay. Cabran emerged. Nadia looked him over. He could clean up pretty well, though his hair was still a problem. It would need to be trimmed soon. It was constantly falling in front of his face, obscuring features that most owners would show off. Cabran had a sturdy jaw, lovely brown eyes, and was surprisingly free of any facial scarring. She unclipped his leash. "You better be on your best behavior tonight." Cabran was silent, as per usual, and expressionless. Nadia gave him a rough tug on his collar before opening the door. There were few signs in the hallway. It seemed as if most people here simply memorized the building's layout. Either way, after a few turns in the observatory's labyrinth, Cabran perked up. He sniffed the air, head tilted up and to the left. Nadia couldn't quite detect anything yet, but then again, she was wearing a thick strawberry perfume. Her familiar turned back to her, and though his eyes were hidden, she knew he was asking to go on ahead. She whispered to him as she obliged, "Remember your manners." The dining hall was rather dingy, not what she'd expected at all. She was greeted first by a low ceiling, bearing down enough that it would have bothered her father. A large table occupied most of the room, with about a dozen chairs arranged around it. On the far wall sat a few long windows, peeking onto the wintry landscape surrounding the building. To the left of the doorway was a side room, filled with shelves of food from what little she could glimpse. Now, though, Nadia's attention was drawn to the people who occupied the table's seats. Baldur sat at the head of the table. On each side were a variety of men and women, none of them particularly sticking out as interesting or unusual from Nadia's quick survey. It seemed as if most of them were already here, including a bird familiar kneeling next to a blonde woman. Baldur smiled. "Ah, Nadia, you're here. Pleasure to see you and to see you found the right room. I told everybody to come early tonight since we've got a new member of the team, you, of course. So everybody, meet Miss Nadia O'Lear and her familiar, Cabran." There was a chorus of greetings and offered names. Nadia's gaze settled on the owner of the bird familiar. She introduced herself as Shial Nofil, the observatory's resident healer. Her familiar settled into a deep bow. "I am Tumfti, Miss O'Lear. It is a pleasure to meet you." She was a small thing, with a delicate voice and short yellow-gray hair. Nadia was intrigued as to if the coloring was a natural part of the species or due to wear and tear. The familiar did seem on the thinner side, but that was Xiao's business, not hers. That is, unless Nadia wanted to make it her business. Maybe in the future. Nadia gestured to Cabran, who was already slipping into a similar gesture once all introductions had been made. "This is Cabran. He doesn't speak, though he can still follow orders plenty well." Though no audible murmurs stirred up the crowd, more eyes were on Cabran now. A tall man with dark curling hair spoke up. Nadia vaguely remembered his name to be Irthe, an expert astronomer.
"Does he still serve you well? Surely his muteness is a downside."
"I mean, I've never had to put up with any stuttering or verbal outbursts, so that's a plus. Far less to cane him for." "What species is he?" Nadia's head swiveled toward a bright-eyed woman. Something. Lian? Leora? Who knows? "He's a mountain goat. His kind are native to these sorts of mountains." "Is that why you bought him?" "Yeah. Technically, it's not a lie if it's why my parents bought him."
Baldur waved his hand at his associates. "Sorry for all the hubbub. I'm afraid we don't much get the chance to see familiars round these parts, us being, well, secluded and all. We're a group of old geezers goggling at your servant."
He laughed. He seemed a rather jolly man. Surprisingly so. Nadia had expected, well, not a colder greeting, but perhaps something more professional than this. "I suppose I will be living with them for nearly half a year. Not much room for formality in tight quarters."
Baldur spoke again. Do sit. Marina, would you and Gav mind being on serving duty tonight?"
Two people rose from the table to go into a side room, one that presumably served as the kitchen. Nadia sniffed the air while Cabran pushed her chair in. Rosemary, garlic, and something chickeny. She smiled as one of the two, she had no way of remembering which was Marina and which was Gav, carried in a pot seemingly full of thick liquid. The woman, Marina, began filling bowls with a brown stew, chunks of meat and vegetables bobbing on the surface.
Baldur cleared his throat. "Do you, want a bowl for your familiar there, or are you to feed him after dinner? I'm not really sure what's customary."
She glanced back at Cabran. "Oh, I usually give him scraps at breakfast, sometimes dinner, too. We didn't much get a chance for breakfast today, so I suppose I'll give him my leftovers later." Baldur nodded pensively. To Nadia, it seemed as if the room was holding back. A certain tension filled the air. On the floor, Xian's familiar had a yellow food dish half full with stew. "I'm surprised you don't have more familiars up here to serve your meals and help with the work." "Oh, we don't waste," piped up Marina as she took her place at the table. Nadia cocked an eyebrow, urging her to go on. "Well, a pet is a waste in these circumstances. If we can do the work ourselves, why bring on another mouth to feed, especially if it'll die quickly? Tunfti at least helps with Xian's magic, something most of us can't help with. I assume your Cabran serves the same purpose?" "Yeah, Cabran helps with my weather magic." Gav spoke up in a deep voice, hand on Marina's as if telling her to back off.
"Most of us are not magically inclined. You and Xian are the exceptions. Besides, most of us rarely leave the observatory. That gives us little chance to purchase our own servants."
Baldur nodded.
"Berbun, the town closest to here, has a particularly small market."
Dinner passed on a quieter note as Nadia's new colleagues asked about her family, her time at Magic's Academia, and what brought her to the Afghan Observatory. It seemed to her as if the topic of familiars was an unwelcome one, and these people delighted more in jokes and stories of youthful exploits. Nadia had few stories she could share, or wished to share, as the night drew to a close. Baldur glanced at a clock next to the entranceway.
"Oh dear, seems we've run on quite late tonight. Nadia, breakfast is usually round 9 if you can make it. If not, food will still be set out, and lunch is at noon. Good night, all of you. Sleep tight and beware of the Margot's bite."
The last part of Baldur's farewell seemed joking as he widened his eyes in mock horror. While Gav and Marina stayed behind to clean up, the others filtered out of the dining room, Nadia and Cabran bringing up the rear as they wandered back to their room. It seemed as if no one else was in the same hallway as them. The walk was long and silent, only filled by the echo of Nadia's boots. Nadia glanced at Cabran, remembering he was there. She internally screamed at herself. "Shit! I forgot to feed him!" To say Nadia was the most responsible of humans was an overstatement. To say she always remembered what she had to do was also an overstatement. Nadia reached up, thankful that her boots gave her some extra height. She put a hand in Cabran's hair, tousling it. He flinched at first, but warily settled down and accepted the gesture. "You didn't do abysmal tonight. Seems you're much more well-behaved round others." Cabran was silent. For not the first time in her few weeks with him, Nadia wished she could read his mind and see what was going on in that thick skull of his. "Tomorrow you get breakfast. I'll have Baldur get a dish for you like Sheon's familiar had." Nadia pulled her hand away from the familiar, remembering her place. She cleared her throat and walked on, 4 paces ahead, as was a respectful distance. She twisted her head around to call back. "Better keep it up, goat!" Her eyes faced front again, but something replayed in her mind. Perhaps she had misinterpreted Cabran's features, but had that been a hint of a smile on his face?